is more or less as follows. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Princeton Zoning Board of Adjustment, which is being held on Wednesday, the 23rd of May, 2018, at 7:30 p.m. in the Municipal Complex. Pursuant to Section 13 of the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of the time and place of this regular meeting has been provided by prominently displaying the schedule of regular meetings on the official notice board in the Municipal Complex, and by transmitting a copy of this schedule to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, the Trenton Times, the Trentonian, and to Comcast Cable of New Jersey, Incorporated. A copy was also filed with the Clerk of Princeton. Could you call the roll for us, please, Claudia?
Ms. Chen?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Coulson?
Here.
Mr. Davidge?
Here.
Mr. Floyd? Mr. Oakman? Mr. Shriver?
Yes.
Mr. Tenema?
Yes.
Mr. Valvanis?
Present.
Mr. Oakman?
Yes.
Just rushing in.
Chairman Royce?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Valvanis, I'm sorry. Did I get you?
Good.
Present, yes.
Thank you.
There's a chair somewhere. All right, so we have some resolutions to memorialize, and the first one of those is the 10 Acre Foundation case, which is file number 1313-116. This was circulated in your package. If you have any changes or comments that need to be made at this time, you should make them. If not, I would like a motion to approve these minutes as presented and a seconder to that motion.
So moved.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a seconder
I'll second
for
it.
that? Did somebody second it? You did, okay. All right. Can you call the roll for us, Madam Attorney?
Yes, I'm sorry. Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Olson?
Yes.
Mr. Oakman?
Yes.
Mr. Shriver?
Yes.
Mr. Valvanis?
Yes.
Chairman Royce?
Yes. The next case is 278 Franklin Avenue, the Burgers, and it is file number Z1818574. The same procedure, it was circulated. If there are changes to be made, we should do them at this time. If not, a motion to approve and a seconder to that motion.
So moved.
I have a motion to approve. Is there a seconder?
Second.
And a seconder.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Olson?
Yes.
Mr. Oakman?
Yes.
Mr. Shriver?
Yes.
Mr. Valvanis?
Yes.
Chairman Royce?
Yes. And the last one of these is Elm Road, 132 Elm Road, with the case number Z1818596. Same procedure. These were circulated. An approval motion if appropriate.
So moved.
We have a motion. Sorry? Okay. We have one, so you'll second it. Is that right? Good. Okay, so would you call the...
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Olson?
Yes.
Mr. Oakman?
Yes.
Mr. Shriver?
Yes.
Mr. Valvanis?
Yes.
Chairman Royce?
Yes. My schedule shows that we should be talking about minutes as well, but these have not yet been prepared for the meeting of March the 28th, and so we will table that until our next meeting. So at this point, we come to the active part, and we have applications, the first of which is from 70 Jefferson Road, and There must be a case number somewhere, and the case number for this is Z1818-590. Mr. Tar knows our ritual, so I will ask Mr. Bridger to be sworn in. I will ask our attorney if all the paperwork is correct and we can
It is
actually-
correct. The board has jurisdiction. Mr. Bridger, do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. The applicants, Tobias Robinson and Elaine Robinson, are the owners of 70 Jefferson Road, and they are seeking a C1 and C2 variance to permit the placement of 2 existing air conditioners in exception to the required setback. Property is located in R3 zone and subject to the use and bulk regulations in accordance with 17A, 241, and 245 of the Princeton Borough Land Use Ordinance. The subject lots complying with respect to the applicable bulk requirements. The applicant has 2 existing air conditioners. Both of the air conditioners were located between the house and the property line on the right side of the house, which was a non-complying location. One of the air conditioners required replacement in 2017 and was moved to a temporary complying location behind the house that comply with a 5-foot setback. The other air conditioner now requires replacement, and the applicant is seeking approval to place both air conditioners on the right side of the house between the house and the side property line. The proposed location will require a variance. Section 17A 380B requires that there be a 5-foot setback, and the proposed setback is 1. Obviously, they need a variance, and they've requested both C1 and C2, and that's pretty much the case. If you have any questions, be glad to address
Thank you.
them.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Bridger? No? Mr. Tar?
We're ready to start if we could be sworn.
Mr. and Mrs. Robinson, if you'd raise your right hand, do you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
We affirm.
Thank you.
So as you heard, the Robisons simply want to replace their broken air conditioning units with new air conditioning units and put them back where they've been for many years. So Mr. Robison's going to go through the exhibit which you have attached to the application and explain the details. They just want to put back their air conditioners.
Thank you. You all have this wonderful sheet, and the key thing on it is these 2 little green boxes in the middle, which is where our air conditioners resided for 14 and 30 years, and where we would very much like to have them again. We're about to buy and replace the downstairs system just in time because it's getting hot, and we hope we can put it there. Last spring, when we wanted to replace the upstairs unit, we were told we would have to wait at least 90 days to ask for a zoning variance. So we regretfully put it in the backyard. You can see a picture of it sitting in the backyard where it's quite an eyesore and interferes with many possibilities for landscaping. And if we had to put the other unit in the backyard, it would have to be even further away. You say to the air conditioning companies, we want it way out there, and they say, well, that's kind of far, but no, I think we can do it. We want to keep it simple. We want our units back where they were. You have on this page also a picture of the unit to be replaced. That's on the right. If you look closely, you can see it's actually further from the house than it has to be because they placed it right next to the guard for the window of the cellar. The new unit should be a little bit smaller and a little bit closer to the house. We do hope you can grant our request.
I'd like to clarify that the unusual circumstance that would justify a C1 variance here, in our opinion, is that the 2 homes are 10 feet apart, that each has a 5-foot side yard, exactly the same, and the units sit within that. And a 4-foot unit would be 1 foot from the property line.
They'll be less than 3 feet, the units. They'll be 1 foot from the house and then less than 3 foot themselves, so that they will not even extend out 4 feet, we expect.
I was interested that in the discussions that are going on to modify the zoning ordinance, there's talk of allowing a 3-foot side yard for air conditioners. So even the current standard is 5 feet. There's talk about reducing it down to 3, but to be honest, we just can't quite meet that. But the testimony was they've been there for 30 years and 14 years respectively. And I also should point out that the Robesons were kind enough to, in addition to the legal notice, they sent a more explanatory personal letter to all their neighbors, giving the phone number and their email addresses, and I gather nobody responded.
We have talked to the Rebacks, who own 74 Jefferson on the other side of these tiny side yards. And I actually have, they wanted to come, weren't able to. I have a video from Barbara Reback saying that she hopes we'll get this variance. They're very much in favor.
And I assume the next-door neighbor who shares this narrow piece of space.
That's what he's referring to.
Right,
No, that's
exactly.
the person you're referring to.
Right,
I'm
they
sorry,
share
I
that space with us, and they're fine.
Yeah.
And there's gates blocking it, so that
Okay.
we're not putting something out to make the town look ugly. We're hiding our air conditioner.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who is here to address this case? No? Seeing no one? What is your pleasure?
I think this would be acceptable. They've been there for a number of years. The fence is going to remain, obviously. Absolutely. Most probably these newer units will be quieter than your original units. Yes, they will. I have no issue with this, and I would suggest we approve it.
Does anyone else have any comment?
As
If
a
not,
si-
are you going to make a motion to approve as requested?
I'll
Mr.
second
Co-
the motion.
Mr. Cohen, as a C1 then, variance? As a C1? Okay.
You seconded the motion? Okay, we have a motion and a seconder. Is there any further discussion of the motion? So could you call the roll for us, please, Claudia?
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Coulson?
Yes.
Mr. Oakman?
Yes.
Mr. Shriver?
Yes.
Mr. Tenema?
Yes.
Chairman Royce?
Yes.
Thank you. It's approved.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Okay. Our next case is 27 Linden Lane, which carries the case number Z1818597. And I'll do the same ritual with you as I did with them. I'll ask Mr. Bridger to enter his comments into the record, and then I'll invite you to do the same. And I am assuming, hopefully correctly, that all the paperwork is in order.
That's correct. The
Is that right?
board has jurisdiction to hear the application.
Good. Mr. Bridger.
Thank you. Scott and Catherine Harmon are the owners of 27 Linden Lane. They are seeking a C2 variance to permit the construction of a small dormer in the attic, an exception to the combined side, smaller side, yard setbacks and the height to setback ratio. Property is located in the R4 zone and is subject to the use and bulk regulations in accordance with 17A 254 and 257 of the former Princeton Borough Land Use Ordinance. The lot for the subject property is non-complying with respect to the lot area. The requirement's 6,000 square feet. The existing is 4,528. It's also non-complying with lot width. The requirement's 60. Existing is 25.45 feet. And the property itself is not complying with respect to the height to setback ratio. It's non-complying. It's basically a zero setback on the lot line that runs between the two houses. Smaller side yard setback is 0. The requirement's 8. And the combined side yard setback requirement's 20, and the existing is 6.64. The applicant is proposing to expand the third floor rear dormer, which houses a bathroom. This will expand the bathroom and make it more functional and usable for their family. The dormer is going to be expanded by approximately 25 feet. The following variances will be required. The required smaller side yard setback, this dormer setback 3.1 feet from the lot line. The requirement's 8. The combined side yard setback, again, it's a 20 feet requirement, and the existing is 6.64, and it represents an increase in the existing degree of noncompliance. And the height to setback ratio, it's right on the lot line, so it's also non-compliant. They've requested consideration under the C2 variance. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to address them.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Bridger? No? Okay, so I guess somebody will need to be sworn in.
That's right. Mr. and Mrs. Harmon, if you raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, on the board, just a quick presentation to kind of describe what it is that we'd like to do and some of the reasons why. Hopefully, looking for too many questions. First of all, I think it's just Claudia and Derek work really, really hard. This is a pretty intimidating process, and I think it's one of those, right?
Maybe you could use a microphone.
There we go. Hello? Sorry. I did just want to thank Claudia and Derek. They're really, really helpful through this process, and it's a big, kind of complicated process for those who don't do it, and it's great to have public servants who can help you through it. What we're doing, as we described, the third floor rear dormer is currently about 5 feet wide. It has a kind of non-complying wreck of a bathroom today that is unusable. It's a little bit crazy. You can see you have to step over the toilet to kind of enter a shower that doesn't work and is, I don't know how it got there to begin with. That is pre-existing. What we'd like to do is we'd like to bump the dormer out about 5 feet in order to make enough space in order to accommodate a shower, a toilet, and a sink on that third floor. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. This is what it looks like from the back. We would not put a third window there, primarily because that's exactly where the shower would be. Obviously, having a window where the shower is doesn't make a lot of sense. So it does look a little bit odd from the back, but again, this is a rear dormer, and I can show you, this is a bit of a panorama looking out our backyard. So on the left-hand side, what you see is my neighbor's shed. Beyond that is another kind of shed garage thing. Our neighbor to the right, that's another shed. You can see a yellow kind of garage in the back. There's nobody who sees this space. There's no house that looks at it. There's not even a back window that looks at this. So cosmetically, the only person who's going to see that is someone who's pulling their car in and out of that yellow garage. So we don't feel like it detracts from the character of the neighborhood or the town. We obviously sent out the required notices and things like that. Karen Loomis is our next door neighbor, so it's a duplex. So Karen is the one who's most affected by this. I've got the letter here. She's either on her way or in Ireland right now, but she's very aware of what we're doing and supportive of it, as you can see in the letter there. And I'm happy to provide a copy of the letter to anyone who needs it. In terms of why, it gets rid of kind of a mess of a space
The dog
right now.
needs a shower?
I'm sorry?
The
Are you
dog
kidding?
needs a shower?
No, there's nobody using that shower. And I don't know if you have teenagers, but I have 3 kind of teen 20-something daughters, and let's just say that shower space in this house is at a premium, especially when all the girls are home. So it would certainly make life a lot easier for our family. I would think other families as well, as young kids grow up to be older kids, having a second bathroom in the house is just a big, huge help for living there. So with that, I appreciate your consideration and would be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Harmon, quick question. Can you give those slides to the board secretary?
Yes.
And we'll call it your Exhibit A1.
Exhibit A1,
Okay.
absolutely. Yep.
Great.
Did you say you're in a duplex?
It is a duplex. I refer to it as a duplex. It's an attached.
Attached? Okay.
I don't know whether it's technically a duplex or whether it's an attached.
No, that's okay. I just was
Yeah, the
curious.
lot line runs right down the middle of the house. That's the reason for all the variances.
Right, so we're kind of, there's a setback required
The
even though
lot
the
line
house
goes
is-
right through the center of the house. And that's one of the reasons that there's a problem. But it's not an insuperable problem.
Thank you.
Do members of the board have any questions? Is there anyone in the audience?
This
who
is
here
a
to
second bathroom?
This would be a second full bathroom. We do have a half bathroom on the first floor, full bathroom on the second. This would be the second full bathroom.
And there was the existing one there that we bought as is.
But it's not usable. It's,
That leaked. It's one window, so
Does this,
never used it.
does the same condition exist in the the other piece of the duplex, that there's like a sort of non-compliant bathroom?
That's a,
Or was it added later? Okay.
yeah, it's just a regular dormer on the other half.
Looks like we're not even adding 5 feet to the width of it.
We're not adding, we're adding 5 feet to the
No, it's-
dorm.
If you go back, it's slightly less.
Oh, sorry,
There.
more like 3 feet 2 inches, I apologize, yeah. I think in simple numbers sometimes.
I move we approve this as a C1, or C2, I'm sorry,
C2.
C2.
Okay. We have a motion to approve as a C2. Is there a seconder?
I second the motion. Second.
Is there any discussion of the motion? Could you call the roll for
Yes,
us,
sir.
then, Claudia?
Mr. Cohen? Yes. Ms. Coulson?
Yes.
Mr. Oakman?
Yes.
Mr. Shriver?
Yes.
Mr. Tenenbaum?
Yes.
Chairman Royce?
Yeah,
Thank you. It's approved.
Thank you.
good. Thank you very much. What is going on? Oh, that's gone.
Yeah.
That's gone off. It's not what's going on. Got the sign in effect. All right. So we come to the last case of the evening, which is a continuation of a hearing that we had last time. And this is for Terhune Road, North Harrison Street, the Sunrise Development, Inc., and it carries the case number Z1717-514. Mr. Bridger, presumably you don't have anything to add to comments you made last time, or is it appropriate for you to enter something else in?
No, I
To the
think
record.
we're just picking up where we left off at the last meeting.
Good.
Good evening. The record, Mark Foley Castro, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Leon, who's been sworn previously, who has some remarks.
I don't think your mic is on. There you go.
Better?
Yeah.
Mr. Leong, you've been sworn previously.
Correct.
You have some comments you'd like to make in connection with the plans before the board, is that true?
Absolutely.
Great.
So, Chairman, members of the board, members of the public, thank you for having us back here again. We appreciate the time. As a follow-up to our last hearing, we certainly heard a great number of the concerns that were raised by the general public, and so spent a good deal of time trying to consider all of those concerns. As a result, what we started trying to coalesce these concerns in a way where we can try to address them. And we spent some time working on some alternate potential plans that we held a neighbor meeting last Thursday, over at the DNR Land Trust, which was attended by 9 members of the public, in order to show them some alternate proposals that we had come up with in response to some of the things that we had heard. I'm going to step away in a moment and just bring up a couple of different exhibits and speak to them from there, but I just want to kind of lay that as an initial starting point of what my intended comments are going to be tonight.
Great.
Is that okay? Sure. Testing. Okay, great. So just to refresh everybody's memory, What is shown right now is Exhibit A7, which was the plan that was shown at our last hearing. This is the 3-story project that is set up against the corner in order to provide the best street presence possible. And amongst the number of different concerns that we had heard last time, chief amongst those were size and scale of the building, as well as proximity to the corner itself. And so we heard those concerns, we thought hard about it, and last Thursday, we presented 2 other options that were alternates to perhaps help address some of these. Do I need I'll mark this. Do you know what exhibit we're on?
8.
A8, okay. So I'm going to mark this A8.
So describe that.
Sure. So A8 is a view from the corner of substantially the similar building that we had originally presented, but with the entirety of the 3rd floor removed from the leg of the building that is closest to the corner. So this removes the entirety, as if you can remember, the building is shaped almost like a C, like a cat C, and the entire leg of the building that runs along Harrison has been chopped off from the 3rd floor onwards, and
Going
extends.
along the other road, it's gone up to 3 floors again?
Yes, so midway down Terhune, it steps back up to be a 3-story option. So we presented this as, okay, we understand if we remove the height, it removes some density, certainly removes some of the massing, would this be potentially a favorable option? And then we also presented a second option, if I may. So this will be A9. So A9 represents a drastically different site plan and building configuration compared to what was originally presented. As I had described previously in our first hearing, this is a really interesting piece of land, and what Sunrise does is for every single project, we go about a design process where we really consider everything around the site as well as we consider the unique layouts of the site itself to try and figure out what fits best. And so this was a particular layout that we had considered a long time ago. It was one of our first ones as we were thinking through all the dimensions, the parameters. And what this layout does is that rather than consolidating the building into more of a compact but tall 3-story building, what we've done is actually separated it out to be a shorter 2-story massing that's set further back from both Harrison and Terhune, and then a 1-story building over here that would be a memory care only building, and so have basically expanded but significantly shrunk the scale of the building.
So the whole of that building is 2 stories? Is that what you just said?
Correct. So this massing here is a 2-story building. So what that does is that it removes actually the height variance, because now at 2 stories we would be conforming to the 35-foot height limit. And additionally, the setback here against Harrison has been pushed further away. So now the building length, the building face is actually parallel to the bank pad. And so the setback is approximately about 58 feet from the property line. And then Beyond the property line is the right-of-way, which includes the sidewalk as well as curb and such. And so, which is about an extra 10 to 15 feet or so before you get to the road. And so this plan dramatically, or it significantly increases the setback to Harrison and also obviously reduces the height of the building. Furthermore, what's happened here is that we flipped things around a bit, and so the parking is in the front in this particular layout. There are different views on whether or not that's appropriate in terms of having parking in the front or parking in the back. However, a significant benefit is ultimately that it just creates a much greater separation and allows the building to be, a significantly set back from the road as well. So it just reduces the overall presence. So between this option here on board A9 as well versus the option of the two-story version of the original proposal on board A8, we spent about a good hour and a half, almost 2 hours, with some of the neighbors and discussed kind of the pros and cons of them. And ultimately, it was pretty much unanimous view that they liked what they were seeing here on A9 in terms of the trade-offs that were happening. And so what we then did is we took that feedback of what the aspects of this design that the public enjoyed and liked and was supportive of, and we went back to trying to figure out how can we improve things. And so what we have to show you next is our attempt to take this and improve it even a little bit further.
So this is now the new proposed building, and you're going to show us other aspects of it. And
I'm going to show you one more that will be the new proposed building, correct?
okay.
So this is Exhibit A10, which is the new proposed building that, again, this is a bifurcated application. So we're ultimately right now seeking for the zone change, but we recognize that a big component of that is a proposed design that generally conforms and fits and helps people get comfortable with the use. So part of the exercise in also showing you the different iterations is to stress the fact that Sunrise is flexible in a number of different ways to respond to concerns that are raised, and that until we get to final site plan approval, many things such as exact design and such are open to further suggestion for further evolution. I'm going to touch upon a couple of the things that happened here and some of the reasons why it's shifted this way and why, as on a whole, I think this is actually a very reasonable and perhaps desirable plan. So what we've done is we've taken the previous plan that I showed you on A9, and rather than split it up into two separate buildings, we've consolidated it into one singular one, and we've extended the second floor all the way through. There's a couple of different reasons for that, chief amongst which is that the physical layout of the site allows for, works better for additional parking, for the increase in additional parking by merging the building together to allow us to curve it around to the rear. One of the major concerns we had heard from other members of kind of staff and council were the desire to move parking away from the front. And knowing how important it is to help improve the overall view and shed and visibility and landscaping of this corner element here at Harrison and Terhune, what we've done is we've taken all this parking and we've shifted it all over and wrapped it around the back side of the building. What that's done is that this has allowed us to add 10 extra parking spaces versus the plan I had showed you on A9. And so, again, one of the themes that was raised in last month's meeting was having sufficient parking, and in doing it this way, it gave us the flexibility to add parking, and depending on the board's suggestion, there's obviously physical ability to add even more if necessary. Additionally, where this ultimately lands is creating a project that responds to the vast majority of some of the concerns that were raised in the past. So this project shown on A10 is smaller and less dense than the original proposal that brought us before you. So it's gone down.
Smaller?
Yes, so the physical building has decreased from 89 units down to approximately 84. The physical square footage has decreased from 82,000 to approximately 72,000 square feet. It has gone down from 3 stories to a 2-story building. And because of this alteration of the layout, our engineer is going to address some of this, but almost all of the various setback variances have been removed as a result. And so what this does is that this allows us to then continue to maintain the same amount of affordable housing units that we had offered in the original project, but dramatically reduce the scale and the impacts and the feel of the building versus what we had shown you a month ago. Yes, so the Medicaid requirement is 10%, and so I believe we're rounding up. 10% of the beds, so we're rounding up to 9. That was in the original proposal. We'll round up. We're willing to round up again to 9 here as well. And so, again, the plan is not entirely fully fleshed out, but you can see kind of the major directions. It's improved the amount of walkability. It's improved some of the setback from the rear. The site plan here today also shows the sidewalk improvement that we're adding to the entirety of the Terhune stretch. As well as what's not clearly shown here, and it should be, is that the easement walking path that is being proposed will be added that runs this length here, allowing pedestrian access from Terhune to the baseball fields and the park to the rear. Additionally, wrapping around of the parking actually also helps to improve the walkability as well as the safety of usage of this pathway, because it will be physically closer and more visible to other activity as well as light as well. So it's not just so isolated. And again, similar to, as I mentioned before, the setback from here to Harrison has been maintained to the plan that was shown on A9, as well as a dramatic improvement in the landscaping, setbacks, and overall character and look and feel of the frontage along Harrison. And just to kind of emphasize that, I have a couple more slides to show. This will be A11. So A11 is a photograph of the corner intersection looking towards this lot as is. Right, so is it Google Earth or is it actual photographs? So these are actual photographs that we sent.
The photograph is looking in a southwest direction, is that right?
Southeast. Southeast, correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So coming towards us would be Terhune, coming left to right would be Harrison. All right. So this is just a reference point. So Exhibit A12 is the view of our building from the corner with all of the existing foliage and proposed landscaping removed, just for the benefit of being able to show the building. So this is not the actual view that upon completion you will see, but merely just as a reference point so you can have a better sense of what kind of design-wise the building is supposed to look like. Just remember that from the angle, it's kind of hard to see the degree of the setback from here because it's from a diagonal. But this gives you a rough sense of kind of stylistically how we're thinking about the building.
But as far as setbacks are concerned, I think you've told us that they're all compliant with the
Correct, that's
the
right.
requirements of the law.
That's right. In fact, they've been increased beyond that.
Yeah.
Right, so the setback to Terhune is now almost 10 feet greater than the original proposal we brought before you. A13. And so this is what the building should look like post-completion because of the landscaping that we are both adding as well as the existing foliage that we are retaining. So you can see much of the very large existing foliage along Terhune will be preserved, as well as we're going to heavily landscape and be able to screen the Harrison side of the building as well. And so it's a lovely building, but we certainly understand the concerns about scale and such. And now at a lower two-story height that would be compliant with the 35-foot limit, along with the screening, I think it can actually fit into the setting without being overpowering. And so, so this comprises the boards I wanted to show you today, and I wanted to also just kind of also express the pathway that we took in order to get to this point. This is by no means final. Things such as the materials and the exact external design are certainly subject to change. Happy to go before the architectural board and discuss that further with our architect. Again, we're happy to kind of push and pull certain things as a whole in terms of the building, but what we wanted to ultimately bring before the board today is a plan that we feel like captures a lot of the concerns that were previously raised and has been thoughtfully maneuvered in a way that we can actually functionally operate. And so that's the conclusion of my presentation.
Mr. Chairman, just a question for clarification, if I may.
Sure.
If some of the things that you were seeking variances for are no longer on the table, what variances are you seeking this evening?
Our engineer will address those.
Okay.
Next witness.
Thank you.
Sure. Additional questions for this witness, though?
I have a question, too, if I might. You said that in your presentation that the lower level kind of landscape was your original idea, and you passed that up. Why did you pass over that to come up with the three-story idea?
After a number of discussions with various folks within the community and within leadership at the city, we were guided that there were certain aspects of parking being required or being heavily promoted towards being to the rear, as well as improving of the sidescape was preferable. And so we were trying to respond to some things that we had heard.
I'm not sure when I should ask the question, but one of the concerns that was expressed last time was traffic coming into your building. And at the time you talked to us last month, you had got the main entrance, if I remember, to the parking area opposite the one that goes into the medical facility on the other side of the road. Have you maintained that rather awkward situation, or has the change of the shape of the building separated those two entrances so that they don't represent a turning hazard for either side of the road?
Yeah, so it's a great question. We brought our traffic expert today who will be best able to address that.
Yes.
Let me ask you another question. You seem to be fond of peaked roofs. In this day and age, people are talking about green roofs. And the advantage of those is that they can provide you with usable open space, which is in a constrained area, the area of the building. And if you have handicapped people who would like to be able to get out into the open, they have an advantage. And I thought last time you had shown us an area in a sort of an alcove in your building, which had that sort of feature. And I wonder why you're not exploiting a green roof, a flat roof with foliage and stuff on top of it to compensate for what I think you've lost in this plan.
Give me one moment. So, to be very fair, Exhibit A10 was only very recently created, perhaps a little bit in haste. The roof element is actually going to be the same as what we had shown previously, where we will have a roof well, and it will be a flat roof. So it's not going to be peaked all the way through to the center.
So it's possible that you will have a green roof that
Correct.
will provide
Correct.
usable open space, which is a good old borough word.
Correct. So the roof element will be consistent with what we had shown previously, where there's a roof well. Our architect is here to also provide some expert testimony regarding that. But what we will regularly do is we move noisy mechanical equipment up on into the roof well and use the mansard roof as a screening element to reduce sound and visual and noise impacts to the public.
I also have two questions that I don't know if this is the right time for them. One is that I don't remember you mentioning before, but maybe you had, but you mentioned tonight about a separate section which then is going to be part of the one building for memory care. Is that a change in what your service is going to be? It seemed like before it was all assisted living. Is that a difference, or did I just not pick that up?
Yeah, there's no change. So in our original presentation, as well as in this current plan, there has always been contemplated a memory care wing, and there will still be one here in this plan.
It actually I know a little bit about this kind of a setting, and I actually think for it to be one building is a better idea, because there might be people who would want to see each other and be in the same building. So,
That's right. The servicing is a little bit easier.
yeah. The other thing I wondered about, I'm not as knowledgeable about the affordable housing requirements, but I know that in these kinds of housing situations, there's often an entry fee, and I wondered if there was and how that would, so there isn't for anyone.
Yeah, so it was a good question. So Sunrise does not charge entrance fees to any of our residents. They are on a rental basis. There may be a nominal community fee upon entry, but nothing like the very large, almost similar to a purchase of a house type entry fee. We don't do that.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions from members of the board?
Will there be expert testimony regarding stormwater runoff based on the revised plan? I know that last time, and this is kind of going off of what Chairman Royce was saying, discussing rain gardens and other things along those lines. I know that that was a prominent feature of the interior courtyard design that you presented last month.
Yes.
And that seems to be not so prominent. So I'd like to get some feedback on that.
Our engineer is next.
The next witness.
Good.
Great.
Why don't you continue with your
Mr. Lang.
witnesses?
Thank you.
Please state your name again for the record.
Jeremy Lang from Mazer Consulting.
You were sworn previously, so please proceed.
Thank you. So good evening. I want to just pick up where Jerry just left off. So you've heard the summary on the change proposed with Exhibit A10, going from 89 units to approximately 84 units, from 3 stories to 2 stories, from about 82,000 gross square feet to about 72,000 gross square feet. Also, the parking has shifted with that, so we went from was 53 parking stalls, we're now at 50, but in accordance with that, the required number of stalls has also dropped from 45 to 42, so we still have the same buffer, if you will, over the ordinance requirement. In terms of the variance impact, it's a net positive, as you might expect. First and foremost, we would eliminate the need for the height variance. It would be conforming, as Jerry just testified to. And then from that, there's also several other variances. There are 2 height to setback variances that we would no longer need. And of course, that's a relationship between height and setback, both by virtue of the building getting shorter and the building coming away from the 2 roadways, Terhune and Harrison. We are fully complying now with those 2 requirements. And then finally, the front setback, the actual horizontal setback, is now conforming on Harrison, and the rear yard setback is also fully conforming. So there's 5 total variances.
The rear yard being with the shopping center lot.
That's correct. Yeah, it was just under, I had explained last time, we were actually using the building to hide some of the loading zone last time. This new layout doesn't need to do that, so we're fully complying now. So those are the 5 variances we're removing. There are 2 minor variances. One has to do with impervious coverage, because we are now spreading the building out more as opposed to being up in the air, so it does increase the impervious coverage. And I'm going to get to the stormwater question because that's probably the biggest impact of impervious coverage. And then the other part is parking between a facade and a roadway. So you'll see a portion of the parking lot on the northeasterly portion of the lot is between Terhune Road and the building. That is single loaded though, so it's not particularly onerous. Also, we have the curved linear layout, so as you're looking at the parking lot, it's not a big rectangle or square with this linear shape. Using the topography, the existing and proposed vegetation, the parking will definitely be very unimposing as viewed from Terhune. So we believe that those are excellent compromises to achieve or really address some of the concerns that we heard from the public last time, as well as during that more recent public meeting that was held by Sunrise. So in terms of the stormwater management, it's the same approach in that we still, first of all, we're going to still meet the RSIS requirements for stormwater management. I want everybody to be clear on that. The state requirements, and this is not because we're good guys, it's the actual state requirement, is not only to meet the existing runoff, but actually reduce the existing runoff for the 210 and 100-year storms. So for the 2-year storm, we have to be 50% of the existing peak rate of flow. For the 10-year, it's 75%, and for the 100-year, it's 80%. So right off the bat, even just doing the bland stormwater management, we're significantly reducing the flow rates for even the site. However, Sunrise is going to go beyond that and use green infrastructure to do that. It's actually something I've been working on with others at the state. We're actually proposing a rule change to make that the norm, but as of right now, it's not the norm. Gray infrastructure is the norm. So there are many opportunities to use green infrastructure. They are different, though, in this plan than they would have been in the prior plan. So I want to walk through that. First and foremost, we're going to start with the roof area. So this is considered relatively clean runoff that we don't need to pre-treat, so I can send that right into a green infrastructure system. So the plan is to both utilize the park, what I'm calling a park area, because it is very significant, the setback from both Harrison Street and from Terhune. Essentially that whole corner there is similar in size and arguably even larger in area than that courtyard, the internal courtyard that we have. So I would see rain gardens all throughout that area, and the idea would be to feed, basically based on size, feed the roof leaders to various rain gardens and make sure they're all getting enough water. We're spreading that water out over a large area. We're providing enough water for the vegetation in those rain gardens to properly and grow and flourish. So that would be one aspect of it. In the rear of the building, we've got this kind of curved linear sidewalk alignment, and the idea there would be every time it's got a curve, either on the inside or outside of the curve, to have a bioretention swale. So these would be more linear, where the rain gardens tend to be more oval or circular. The bioretention swales would be more of a linear feature, and we would have those on alternating sides of the sidewalk to follow that undulation in the overall alignment of the sidewalk. That provides a real nice visual interest, but also by stretching it out along that whole rear facade, essentially those roof leaders, as they're coming down, they'll all have a bioretention swale to connect to. We're not having to pipe it down any significant length, to the left or right. They'll just essentially go straight out, feed that section of bioretention swale behind the building. And again, provide that visual interest as you're walking through that area. I would envision some benches set up to take advantage of those areas. In addition to that, depending on the overall sizing, we may also have some underground infiltration that is basically after the bioretention. So the bioretention would take the first flush, the initial water. Bioretention is extremely effective at providing water quality, and then that cleaned water would go into potentially a pure either detention or infiltration system for overflow, so we can get some additional stormwater attenuation, because I understand there are a lot of flooding concerns in the area, so the more we can do, the better. I should have started with this, but one of the advantages of bioretention compared to typical gray infrastructure, gray infrastructure essentially just holds the water. It's similar to a bathtub. It's just a big container, water fills up, slowly bleeds out. And that's good. I mean, there's certainly value in that. But where bioretention is a little different, the bottom of the system, which is usually at least 18 inches, often 24 inches of soil, acts like a giant sponge. So instead of it just being free water that's just going to drain out of an opening in an outlet structure, the water is actually held in the soil structure itself. And then that can either be used in evapotranspiration to actually feed the plants, or to the extent there's excess water that the roots don't uptake, we can have an underdrain, and that slowly, not over hours, but over days, bleeds that water out. So the sponge is basically slowly releasing the water. So we really get a very extended detention at worst, and at best, we actually get evapotranspiration where the both the water and frankly some of the nutrients that are typical in stormwater runoff are actually being uptaken by the plants and the bushes and trees and so forth.
Have you done a soil survey in that area?
We have.
My memory is that there's a clay seam there and there's also shale.
There is. So we're not proposing there, and that's one of the advantages of bioretention, because we're not proposing significant groundwater recharge where the water would actually go all the way down into the aquifer, because that's not what's happening today. So it would be very difficult to try to force that to happen, something that doesn't naturally occur. But what we can do is on top of those layers, on top of that shale, on top of that clay, we can put the bioretention mix, this I'll call it a sponge essentially, and drain into that, and then have a delayed response, because that sponge is going to hold the water, have the combination of an underdrain, of the evapotranspiration, and in really large events have an overflow that would go into then that underground detention that I was talking about. So it would be a multi-layered system, but not dependent on infiltration beyond the bioretention system. So we'd have infiltration occurring in the bioretention soil mix, but it wouldn't have to infiltrate down through the shale or the clay to work. We've had a lot of success with these types of systems. I happen to live down in Ocean County, and there we get a lot of infiltration, but in a lot of parts of the states we don't have all that sand and gravel underneath, and this is no exception. But that doesn't mean that green infrastructure doesn't work. There are many other solutions.
You talked also, I'm pursuing my green roof concept. I thought evidence had been given that there was an area of roof that would be in fact a green roof, and that presumably will also have a water retention feature associated with it. Huh?
I did not testify to that.
It's not going to gush out as it would from a peaked tiled roof.
I did not testify to that last time, but as you just heard Jerry say, that's something they're open to, and they are absolutely effective as stormwater management. My company, myself included, have designed several of them. I could even bring some pictures. They are excellent. There is engineered media that's very light, so it's come a long way in terms of...
But that's not currently in the plan, is what you're telling me, is
well,
that right?
The plan is not...
There's not a plan.
It's not really a plan, right? You're looking at the entirety of the plan in this color rendering. And that's why Jerry was making the point that, and that's the advantage of going with a bifurcated application, because we are able to make these changes to be very flexible, because we're not re-engineering with every change. Basically, we're working to get consensus, and once we've got something that we think everybody's going to be happy with, then we're going to go ahead and fully engineer it. But that said, we're not doing this in the dark either. We do have a full geotechnical exploration, so we know what we're dealing with under the ground. We've done pre and post hydrology here, so we know how much water we're talking about. So everything I'm saying is not just speculative. I know we can do it, and we can do it in the manner described. The things where there would be a little bit of a uncertainty would be how much of a green roof, for instance. That we would do, and that's something, and there's a lot of different ways to do green roofs, and there's also a concept called blue roofs. The DEP recently adopted a B&P chapter on blue roofs too.
These are solar cells that have got a pretty blue color.
It's more to do with storage and beneficial reuse of water, so that's another possibility. you know, that could be done. Sometimes they're done in combination where they're kind of sandwiched. It's a green roof over a blue roof. So there are a variety of alternatives to explore.
Okay.
We'll certainly work with Sunrise to do that.
All right, so you've told us what variances you're taking away. Can you just give us the list of variances that this plan would currently require?
Certainly. I do want to finish on the stormwater. If you don't mind, let me just finish the stormwater, and then I'll absolutely answer that question. So that would be the building roof area, so we're talking the area behind and also both legs of the intersection. As we move to the front of the building, and we had this in the prior proposal, it would stay, we're going to do a concrete paver for the whole drop-off area because we want to accentuate that. And that would be permeable pavers. And it would be the same thing. We can have a sand layer under the pavers, and then we can under drain that as well. We've used that. We actually use that a lot of times in sports fields, in synthetic sports fields. That works very well because, again, you get the water quality, you get the extended detention, and at the same time, we're effectively dealing with the stormwater not having flooding, we're not having tripping hazards, or slipping hazards, I should say. And then as you move into the parking lot, I would see two things happening on probably more on the northerly edge, kind of on the outside of the curve, if you will. I would see us having, again, the bioretention swale approach, potentially even instead of the traditional steel or iron inlets where it goes down into a pipe, skip that entirely and have openings in the curbs. Often right on the stall lines, we're dividing the parking stalls, you have a little 2-foot opening that sits right on that. So the cars are still hitting a full-face curb with the tires. But in between the cars, you've got these openings where the water can come right off the asphalt directly into the bioretention swale. And it saves the whole pipe thing, saves us some elevation from a design perspective. And then it would be a similar thing, a combination of both an under drain and an overflow system. The overflow then would go into essentially buried pipes under the parking lot, and that would handle, if we needed some extra volume for the really big storms, a 100-year storm, that type of thing, we would have that additional volume to kind of back up the bioretention swales. One thing I can tell you, these designs are very conservative. The DEP makes you assume a lot of the bioretention fails, so we will be designing for that. But in reality, especially when it's an end user like Sunrise who has an excellent maintenance record, these will be very effective systems, and we will wind up with an oversized detention system because the bioretention is going to do a lot more than we account for in the stormwater design. So I'm very confident that we can manage the stormwater not only to meet the regulations, but frankly exceed them, both from a regulatory and frankly a practical standpoint. So in terms of the bulk variances and the D variances, the use variance obviously remains. That fundamentally hasn't changed. The floor area ratio and density, they change but don't go away. There are a fewer number of units. There is less floor area, so they're reduced but not eliminated. The height variance is completely eliminated. The sign variances, that's something we would be flexible on. Obviously, there's pros and cons to that, so that's something that we would continue to discuss with the board, but that's not really driven by the layout. The sign is the sign, and again, we'll have that discussion to see what the board's feeling is on that. We are eliminating the rear yard setback, the front yard setback, the height to setback on Harrison, the height to setback on Terhune, and then we would be adding the impervious coverage variance and the parking between the road and building facade. So net is essentially we are adding 2 variances, removing 5. So it's a net reduction of 3 variances, plus the density and the floor area ratio variances are being reduced.
We're not being asked to, we're just talking about a use variance this evening. We're not talking about a use and bulk variances. Is that correct?
Correct.
So all this testimony, which is fine, I'm not objecting to it, but it's all going to be repeated when we do, when and if you come in for a site plan approval.
Correct.
So I assume we're going to hear something in support of the use variance?
Our planner will address that, yes.
Okay.
So any further questions or something I didn't cover you'd like to hear more on? Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry, the variances?
Is your microphone on?
I'm sorry, maybe I missed it. Thank you for a very detailed and excellent presentation. My understanding was that you were going to be seeking a variance for the impervious coverage. Did I miss what the variance is that you're looking for?
Yes, that's what I was just going through.
He did address that. You can repeat that.
Okay, so
I
then
think-
please forgive me for being sophomoric. What is it specifically that we're looking for? What is the percentage? What numbers? What are we looking at?
I don't have an exact answer on that right now because this is a very conceptual plan. So I'm gonna give you an answer, but I don't want to be held to it because I don't know the final numbers. The way it's calculated right now, we're barely over. The requirement is a 40% maximum coverage, where the way this plan sits now, it's at 41.06, so it's just 1.06%, but you're barely over it. There probably are a few more things that aren't envisioned here. It's a little more sidewalk, or there's always something that gets added, so the real number could be, maybe 42%, something like that. But it'll be very close. It's not like it's some exaggerated, but unfortunately, I don't think I'll be able to meet the actual standard and still have all the pedestrian access. You can see the extensive sidewalk system we've got shown on A10. That certainly contributes to it. But we think it's important to have that pedestrian availability for the residents, as well as all the sidewalk out on Terhune, because we're going to connect to the Harrison Street sidewalk and then continue all the way down the Terhune frontage, which I think will be a tremendous benefit to the public. But it does, of course, come at the price of some impervious coverage.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Okay.
Keep going.
Mr. Shropshire. Thank you. Please state your name for the record.
David Shropshire.
Sir, if you'd raise your right hand, you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you.
And your credentials, please.
I'm a professional engineer and professional planner in the state of New Jersey. I've been practicing traffic engineering and transportation planning for over 35 years. I have appeared before Princeton and Princeton Borough and over 200 municipalities throughout the state of New Jersey. With regard to assisted living and Sunrise, I think I was on the original assisted living that was built in New Jersey way back in the 90s. And I've worked on at least 23 or over 30, 30 with Sunrise, 23 of them, I believe, in the state of New Jersey, and probably about 50 overall. So
we have no trouble with the qualifications. So.
Great. You have a report
you.
you'd like
We should get on with
present
it.
to the
Yes.
board, please?
Mr. Shropshire, just one question. So you're testifying with regard to your expertise in traffic engineering?
Traffic only.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We prepared a traffic study for the proposed site, and obviously that was based on some of the original assumptions of 89 units, and also had more parking spaces, and it's all craft my testimony to what's being proposed tonight. The traffic study that we performed was based on data that we collected at the intersection of Harrison and Terhune, and also we counted the intersection of Terhune and the medical center driveway, which we are proposing to align with, so we had that data. That data was collected on a typical weekday, I believe it was a Thursday in June. We have subsequently gone out and recounted on Terhune to see whether or not anything's changed substantially over the year. It has not. In addition, we counted during the normal morning peak periods, 7 to 9. We also counted in the afternoon between 2 and 6, which we understand schools in the area and also peaking for this particular use, traffic-wise, usually generally occurs before the typical rush hour sometime in the 4 to 6 hour time frame. So we extend the hours that we did our background traffic counts. What I can tell you is that the intersection of Terhune and Harrison today is operating at good levels of service. Average delays at the intersection of less than 20 seconds per vehicle during the peak times, the peak hours. And the intersection of the medical office in Terhune is also operating with what I would call acceptable levels of delay, level of service B or better. The board's familiar with levels of service, A through F, sort of like report card grades. B is a good level of service and a generally accepted level of service.
From those existing conditions, what we do with the traffic study is we overlay the proposed use into the traffic system. And we have to do several things to overlay that. The first thing we have to do is estimate how many trips are going to be generated by the proposed use. We relied on the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation manual, which is one of the sources that we traffic engineers use and are accepted by most municipalities, most counties in the state of New Jersey, and the New Jersey Department of Transportation in terms of estimating trips for different land uses. I can also tell the board that with regard to assisted living, we have contributed to the database that the Institute of Transportation Engineers use to estimate trip generation. And we have done counts over time at assisted livings, which confirm the data and also supplement what was part of the data set that our society uses. So it's a known entity with regard to average trip rates for this type of use. Okay, what will this generate? It's going to generate somewhere around 20 to 35 peak hour trips total. 20 to 35 peak hour trips. Now, today, Terhune is carrying between 450 to 550 vehicles in a peak hour. So you can see it's not a great generator with regard to the traffic that's on Terhune during the peak hour. The intersection of Harrison and Terhune has about 1,400 peak hour vehicles on it. So you can see this is not generating a lot of traffic in comparison to what's out there on the existing intersection that's operating a good level of service. Give you one other comparison. The medical office driveway, it's not the full trip generation for that use, but it's generating between 175 to 225 trips on Terhune during the peak hours, to give you a relative comparison to what we're talking about here. I'll give you one other relative comparison. The existing zoning for the site for senior housing, that would generate somewhere between 15 to 20 vehicles during a peak hour. So we're very comparable to that type of use in terms of trip intensity during the peak hour. What happens, how can we overlay that traffic now onto the roadway network? Well, we typically do trip distributions based on existing traffic, and I think in this case it was a fairly good comparison. We not only looked at the intersection of Harrison and Terhune to see where trips were distributing in the network, but we also saw what traffic was being distributed from the medical office building up and down Terhune, and that gave us a very good idea of what we would expect trips to be heading back towards Harrison from our driveway or away from Harrison back towards Van Dyke and Snowden. What we found is of those 35 peak hour trips that we're going to be generating, about 5 of them will be heading back to the east, 30 back towards Harrison. So very low impact in both directions really, but it's more or less that traffic's going to be primarily heading towards Harrison and that signalized intersection to disperse to the nearby higher level roadways. When we do our traffic analyses to find out what happens with capacity analyses, there is no changes in the levels of service. So the intersection of Harrison and Terhune still operate at a level service B. The overall intersection still have delays under 20 seconds. Our driveway will operate at a level service C. Looking at those delays, it's going to be less than 20 seconds of average delay on our driveway. It doesn't really change what happens on the medical center driveway with regard to how the capacity and the operating characteristics work. A little bit more delay, but nothing significant. And we would conclude that this won't have a significant impact on the street network just based on the fact that this is not a substantial generator of traffic. Won't be any need for improvements either at the driveway from a capacity standpoint. So that's kind of a nutshell on the traffic impact side of it. I know there was questions also raised with regard to parking. The first thing that we tend to look at with the assisted living is the requirement from the residential site improvement standards, which is 0.5 spaces per unit, which would dictate for 84 units 42 parking spaces. We're providing 50 parking spaces on the site, so we far exceed what the residential site improvement standards would require. The Institute of Transportation Engineers also has data on parking generation. The average parking rates are less than what are in RSIS, so we would tend to look at RSIS as a good standard with regard to what should be provided out there. In addition, we've done parking surveys not only at Sunrises but at other assisted livings, and we found that ratio to be a very good ratio in terms of what is actually being demanded for this particular use. So by providing 50 parking spaces, we're more than sufficient with regard to complying with generally accepted standards, and also for this particular Sunrise and how it operates to meet what the needs of the Sunrise are. I know your ordinance would call for, if I believe, if I read it correctly, 110 parking spaces on the site, maybe reduced now based on the number of units. I think the 1.25 spaces per unit was more set up for a senior apartment as opposed to an assisted living, and that's why the ratio is so high. So I think we have demonstrable proof that we are providing more than sufficient parking based on all the standards that I could quote to you and our practical experience with regard to these types of uses, and that your ordinance probably was more intended for something of a different nature with regard to senior housing. With regard to the access points, I know there was even a concern raised, I think, by the chair with regard to where they're located and how they'll operate. With the one driveway that's aligned with the medical center driveway, that generally is the most accepted way to do driveway locations, align them if there are other driveway cuts. In this particular case, we're about 375 feet located back from Harrison. It wouldn't make practical sense to try to locate it closer to get enough separation from the medical center driveway to create safety with regard to left turn movements in and out of these sites. So I believe aligning it is the best thing that we can do with regard to the first access. Second access is located about 200 feet away from that access, which is sufficient spacing between driveways to not create any safety issues for the left turn movements in and out. I read the transcript from the last hearing, so I was aware of some of the comments with regard to speed along Terhune. I did look at it again tonight, and when I was up earlier in the week at the site, I did notice that at a couple of the cross streets, Grover and I think Meadowbrook, there is cross-hatch striping for a crosswalk to connect to where the path is on the other side of the street, with signage indicating pedestrian crossing. I think that would be an appropriate application at the driveway, it's the western driveway that aligns with the medical office, to put another one of those crosswalks up with signage. They tend to help with traffic calming. I'm not going to tell you it's going to instantaneously solve any speeding problem, but anything that we can do out there to add striping and signing that indicates pedestrians is a positive thing and can help. So I would suggest that might be an improvement that can be done at the western access, which aligns with the medical center. And that would also create a close-in opportunity to safely cross the street to get to the pedestrian connection that goes into the playing fields. So we're providing something on the street itself that has more than a purpose for stopping traffic. We're slowing traffic down. It's got a public purpose for pedestrians. I think that kind of covers what's in my report.
Okay. Do we have any questions?
I still have a question about the parking. It may be that you are accurate about how many you need for the residents, but you are going to have people working there, which, as I recall, the peak shift would be 35 employees.
Correct. And
most of whom would have cars.
I apologize for kind of not addressing that, because I did read that in the testimony. There was a question. The parking data that I'm giving to you is a composite of all the parking demand on an assisted living site. That would be employees, visitors, caregivers, who's ever on site. So it's not just one segment of it, and we haven't forgotten. I've worked on a lot of these assisted livings. I've heard of one person in an assisted living who has had a car and that was an accommodation. They didn't want to get rid of the car. The guy didn't drive it, but they just wanted to park it on site. So there's not residential parking on site. It's employees, and then there would be visitors. And we actually did some surveys on Mother's Day when we thought we would hit a real high level of activity with regard to visitors, and it's sobering to say that it was spread over the course of the day, and it was not creating any more demand than you would expect on a regular day in terms of peak demand with a peak hour time. So the data that I'm giving you is pretty comprehensive and covers even event days with regard to holidays where we would expect we would have a higher level of visitor activity.
Had heard someone say last time that the residents wouldn't be allowed to have cars. So is that true, or is that up for debate?
That is true in this instance, yes. They will not drive.
There was one other, I guess, component of my testimony which kind of feeds into the planner's testimony, and that is that from a traffic perspective, I don't believe there's any substantial detriment to the public good with regard to this particular use. And I don't believe there's any impairment, substantial impairment to your zoning plan or your master plan or your zoning ordinance from a traffic perspective related to this. And it's just because it doesn't generate a whole lot of traffic, and that whole lot of traffic that it doesn't generate is pretty comparable to what it's zoned for. And so from a traffic perspective, I believe that there is no substantial detriment.
Anyone else? Okay, do you want to?
Okay, our next witness, Mr. Muller. Thank you. Please state your name for the record.
Mark Muller. Mark Muller.
Mr. Muller, if you'd raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yes.
Thank
Your
you.
credentials, please.
I'm a licensed architect. I've been a practicing architect for 33 years. Currently licensed in 9 states, including New Jersey. I've designed, been involved in planning and design of virtually hundreds of buildings, including over 75 senior living, assisted living, and senior housing projects. I have provided testimony in New Jersey before, both in Warren and Tenafly. I'm here tonight to just give you an overview.
So you're offering Mr. Muller as an expert in architecture?
We are.
Yes.
All right, and does the board accept his credentials?
I think there's no
Yes?
problem.
Okay.
It's what they say that's
your role in
important,
this
not their
project?
credentials.
Our firm will be the architect of record, so I will be involved in the design and execution of the not only the design but also the
Can you
construction.
really use the microphone? Bring it closer
Yes.
to your mouth.
Sorry.
Turn it on.
It's
look
very
at
loud
it,
from where
and
I'm sitting.
speak.
But, okay. So we'll be involved in the design and execution of the construction documents. We'll take part in the construction administration, seeing the construction through, executing the punch list and so forth and so on, all the way through the end. As you've heard earlier tonight, this is a very, very recent plan adjustment, and there's many details to still be fleshed out, but I wanted to just go over some of the notions that we have in mind that are illustrated on the plan. First and foremost, the site configuration with stretching out this floor plan in a much more linear fashion than the previous proposal. Some of the distances, walking distances for the residents have been increased. So there will be a different way that we will probably organize the internal public spaces, but it is still going to have some of the primary characteristics that Sunrise tends to have. So they'll have many communal spaces. By that I mean common dining rooms, bistros, libraries, those sorts of communal public functions for the residents will likely be on the ground floor, with some additional smaller ones on the upper floor. But by and large, most of those common spaces will be grouped near the center entrance, where we have a porte cochere drop-off. There are a number of external activity areas that we'll take advantage of, mostly walking loops that you'll see highlighted on this site plan. So there'll be
A10, that is?
On A10, correct. You'll see a number of amenities that are being proposed between the porte cochere drop-off and Harrison, the walking loop, as well as being able to circumnavigate the entire footprint of the building. There was a mention earlier of the green roofs. While we haven't flushed that out, the one thing that we will probably have, which is similar to the earlier proposal, is for the memory care residents. They typically have their own private, secure outdoor terrace. Now, whether if you have site available to you, that's wonderful to do it at grade, but in many instances, we create them on upper levels. So to the extent that it's a green roof as you're describing or envisioning it, where it's essentially all green and there's not a great deal of walking surface, that's probably not the type of green roof that would be in the memory care component. There certainly would be some landscape and potential opportunities for maybe raised bed gardening, that sort of thing. But by and large, it's outdoor recreation space for the residents. So there would be pavers and that sort of thing. To the extent that other green roof opportunities exist, we'll still flush that out. We haven't ruled it out. But as Jerry mentioned earlier, some of the massing considerations, the peaked roofs that you see in the suggested sketches, those are there for a number of reasons. Obviously, the form and the look of the building, we're trying to be as sympathetic as possible to the stylistic character of the neighborhood. So moving this to a two-story size certainly helps that. You know, we'll be using a variety of architectural components, gables, hips, those sorts of things in the design of the exterior. To the extent that there's opportunities to create green roofs, we'll certainly look into that. A bit more about the sloped roof. Jerry mentioned that we do that in many cases for aesthetic reasons, but also quite functional. So if you have a two-story building and you're having some portion above that second floor having a peaked roof, that peak doesn't generally complete itself. And what I mean by that is that it's a bit of a mansard. So at the top of that second floor, you probably still have a flat roof. And there you can put some of the requisite mechanical equipment. Most of that equipment is by and large, no higher than 5 feet. There are some pieces that are a bit taller than that, but by and large, there's a lot of low mechanical equipment that could be completely shielded from public view. And so
the heat exchangers for air conditioning? And
yes,
things
yeah.
of that sort?
Yeah, there's a number of things. There's generators, other things that may go up there.
Yeah.
And so that it provides both a visual and acoustic screen, actually. It helps, you know, keep that stuff tidy. So that's what we have in mind for the massing. I mentioned the material palette a bit. So this building, by being very long, I'm going to take this with me. Is this is on? So the intent with this long footprint is to sort of break this massing down into 3 components. Each component, you might refer to it as a household. So within each household, there will be quite a bit of architectural manipulation within each one. There may be a strong center component, and then end components to each one of these. So it's not just going to be this massive, battleship of an unending roof. There's going to be a lot of articulation within each one of those households. Articulation both in massing and the intent is to also have the same type of articulation in material choice. So there would be a variety of materials. We typically use any number of percentages of masonry or stone, along with clapboards, the same type of corner boards and trim, and the same type of detail that one might find in the residential neighborhood. So it definitely will have character, substance, and it will be something very, very familiar to the neighborhood. In addition, there are some one-story components. I mentioned the porte cochere before, right in the center of the entry. But both on the rear as well as on the front, there would also be a fairly sizable one-story porch, so the farmer's porch that wraps around that entire center pavilion, also to help break down the scale and add a bit of semi-public space to the building. A few other bits and pieces about the construction of the building. Even though this will look very, very residential in nature, it's still very much built for permanence and safety. So these are typically a non-separated mixed use. It's a construction type 2A, so it's basically steel and concrete. It's not a wood building, it's a very safe building, fully sprinkled. So even though it will look very, very similar to residences that might be up and down the street, it really has the life safety protection of a well-built, virtually a well-built hospital, if you will, but it will look very residential. If that really concludes my remarks, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
What would the construction time frame be?
The construction time frame for projects of this size can vary, but I've seen them in the 13 to 15 month, 16 month, perhaps. It really is a function of many things. Yeah.
Okay, I think.
Thank you.
That's all we have, Mr. Chairman. We have our planner at the next hearing. That's all we have for this evening.
Okay, I'll open questions from the public.
Hold on.
Excellent.
Mr. Chairman,
That's
we
appropriate.
have tonight the municipal engineer,
I'm sorry, I can't
I'm
hear.
sorry, let me speak into it. We have this evening the municipal engineer, Deanna Stockton, as well as the municipal traffic engineer and the municipal planner. I don't know if Ms. Stockton or Mr. Stenkus want to provide any comment on what they heard this evening.
Do you think it's better to do that now, or to ask people if they have comments, and then maybe the staff can include those in their thoughts?
Okay,
It's
that's
up to
fine.
you. I don't mind one way
No,
or the
I'm
other.
just want to make sure the board knows that they're here this evening, so that if you have questions you'd like to direct it to them, they're available to address
Yeah.
any questions.
Do we have any questions we specifically want to ask the staff at this point? If not, then I'd like to open the floor to the members of the public.
I just have one quick question before we do that.
There you
I guess
go.
I've been waiting.
Couldn't find you.
I've been waiting for some testimony about the use variance and the D variance. Am I to understand that we're actually not going to get that tonight? Is that correct?
You're going to get that at the next meeting.
Okay, so that means we have to carry this case to the next meeting?
Well, we're going to have to discuss that. The next meeting has 4 cases on it already. I thought we could wrap this case up tonight. It's early yet, but we'll probably have to have a special meeting. I'm sorry.
We would appreciate that. We have one more witness, our last witness, at the next hearing. It could be quite lengthy as well.
if this is going to be obviously very time-consuming, would we want to entertain a special meeting for this?
Well, we'll have to. The next meeting is fully booked with 4 cases at timeout.
It's going to be perhaps difficult to get a full board during the summer months. I guess we can try.
We'll try. Sure. We'll have to
and
see what we can
what
come up with.
do. Yeah. So, let me have my third and hopefully lucky attempt to see if anyone in the audience wishes to address this case. If so, come up to there should be a microphone there, but it's been stolen and put on the front desk. Can you take that microphone and put it on the lectern? Oh, we've got one.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Excuse me, did everybody
you'll
hear
have
that?
to-
There is a court reporter here taking down what you're saying, so she's asked for her benefit as well as ours. Please state your name and address for the record, and then we're going to need to swear you in, and then you can speak.
Thank you. My name is Regina. Is that too loud? Alivisatos. Alivisatos. I live at 389 Terhune Road, which is the corner of Terhune and Grover.
Ma'am, do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you.
So I really do appreciate the work that Sunrise put into this plan, which is very analogous, I would say, to the plan that you showed us at my home, as a matter of fact, a number of years ago now, maybe a year and a half, whatever. And this is more palatable from a height standpoint in the sense that it won't tower over us. I also really appreciate the traffic study and the comments by the traffic engineer regarding putting crosswalks in. The only problem is in this neighborhood already that nobody adheres to the speed limit and nobody honors those crosswalks unless you physically throw yourself in the street and put your hands up. So speed is a big issue, and although that is an ongoing issue, it will become more of an issue, both from the standpoint of volume of cars as well as speed. And I do realize that many cars come along Harrison going to the medical building, but many cars also come up Grover as well as along Terhune to go to the medical building and ultimately to this facility. So I believe that we, from a traffic standpoint alone, have serious concerns with the use of this land for this specific I guess, use or building, whatever. We also have serious concerns about noise. I didn't hear that specifically addressed tonight, although it was addressed at the last meeting in terms of, but the building design was different at the last meeting, so I'm not clear at this point on how you will provide some noise barrier in terms of garbage trucks, delivery trucks, things like that. I mean, I live less than 200 yards from, I think probably 100 yards from where the side entrance will be. So I'm not clear on what you will do about that. In addition, of course, there will be a noise burden in terms of medical vehicles, be they ambulances or, I mean, it's a senior facility. So, you can't do anything about that. But that is a serious concern for us. So at this point, yes, the facility design looks better. Maintaining some of the trees would be nice. But we still have serious concerns with the use of this land for this specific facility from a traffic and a noise standpoint.
Thank you.
My name is Helen Hunt. I live at 32 Monroe Lane. Is this mic working okay?
It is. Ms. Hunt?
It's shouting at me. Okay.
Mrs. Hunt, do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I do.
Thank you.
Okay. I came in a bit late. I understand there was a revision of height. I'd have a specific question. Will there be a portion or portions of the two-story building, which actually would be more than 35 feet above grade level?
No.
No.
There will not be.
Even with the things on top?
Correct.
The equipment on top, the air conditioners and so on, the flagpoles, whatever you have up there?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Well, I actually did originally have a comment, which was that I think the Anlinger Center over at Princeton University at the corner of Olden and Prospect is a very good example of how the height of a building can be kept down, and yet the size of the building can be large. They've dug down into the ground. That was, I think, partly because of the 35-foot restriction or whatever restrictions applied there, but also they did have another reason, which was to minimize vibration. So they wanted to get down to bedrock, and because they have sensitive instruments at the ground level. But that's a very good example, and as far as I know, the university would plan to do that in the future if they meet obstacles to proposals to build future large buildings. They would just plan to go down into the ground, dig out the ground, so that the building looks much less large. And I would encourage some of you who might be interested to go over there and walk around the building and have a good look, because it looks very attractive for what is in reality a very large building, 129,000 square feet, I think. I also do have a concern, as many people do, that this particular site is not a particularly good use of the land. I think residents there should be able to walk to the shopping center, and my understanding is that there would be very few of the residents who would be able to walk to the shopping center.
Thank you.
Hi. Joanne Hegarty, Hegarty, and yes, I tell the truth.
Thank you very much.
Okay. I live at...
You need to be-
Okay. I live at 386 North Harrison Street, and I've lived there with my family since 1978, and I'm going to show you on the map.
Okay.
So for 40 years, I've looked at this lot every day, 3 times a day, out my window for dinner. I wish that it could stay, but it probably can't. And I've spent time considering how this would affect me from a scale, from a height, from a traffic. And I was vehemently objected to the really large building. But these adjustments that they've made says to me, I believe my husband, myself, we can support the variance for this type of use, and hopefully get something that will be good for the neighborhood and good for the future of our area. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, good evening. I'm Michelle Pirone, Pirone, Lambros, Lambros, resident at 107 Grover Avenue, and I do swear to tell the truth. I appreciate all that the Sunrise Company has done, and I'm not against having a Sunrise assisted living facility in Princeton. We do, I think, have a need for that, and I just don't think that the plot of land that's been designated makes sense. I believe that we would lose a prime opportunity to put a senior living development there that could patronize the shopping and dining at the Princeton Shopping Center. I think we could meet our affordable housing obligation. We could give seniors a place to downsize to and still stay in Princeton. There's a huge need for that. If we develop residences there, not assisted living, seniors could live within a few steps of McCaffrey's. They could have the convenience of shopping, dining, and that would give them an access to a very healthy, comfortable lifestyle. I believe also that this would be a win-win for the retail community as well, because Princeton Shopping Center has many vacancies right now. And in part, that's due to not enough foot traffic. So residential communities within walking distance, like smart growth developments, will greatly enhance foot traffic and be a draw for the retail and restaurants communities. I think that we could probably do, and I'm not an expert on this, but affordable housing, our obligation could probably do as well or better than what the assisted living would do for us, because it's 5 acres. And in summary, I just ask that this variance be denied and that the property be used for the zone as it's zoned today for senior residence housing. Thank you.
My name is Nat Bottigheimer. I'm a resident, 26. Sorry. My name is Nat Bottigheimer. B as in boy, O-T-T-I-G-H-E-I, M as in Mary, E-R. Resident of 26 White Pine Lane in Princeton.
Sir, do you swear or affirm your testimony
I
will be
affirm to
truthful?
tell the truth.
Thank you.
That I will tell the truth. I am a strong supporter of the use of this property for residential development. I have written a letter to the Town Topics that was published on this several months ago. I'm shocked, really, though, that we're here tonight hearing about design and traffic issues without having any testimony about the use. I'm really shocked by the discourtesy to the public and the board that we're talking about things like trip generation rates when we haven't really been told exactly what the use is. I've been told what I think it's going to be, but I don't really know what it's going to be, and so I can't really speak to the variance that is supposed to be or expected to be requested. My testimony is to the value of this site for development, and I'm just going to echo what others have just said before me, that having a development there that houses people who can walk to the stores and the community opportunities and the transit and the bike stations and everything else that makes independent living possible is the opportunity of this site that is one of the few in the town that offers this opportunity. It increases safety for people who live there because they can reduce their dependence on automobiles. It increases their health. It increases the safety of others who are not encountering car drivers on the road that they don't have to, or maybe at the end of their driving lives. And so the use that is most appropriate for this property is a use that enables people to take advantage of that opportunity for sustainability, for social inclusiveness, for traffic reduction reasons. When it comes to traffic, I will make the point that if people who can take advantage of that opportunity of living there, they're not going to be making a lot of vehicle trips, and there are not going to be a lot of people who are helping them and caring for them making peak hour trips to the facility. And the trip making of people who live there is probably going to be more on an off-peak time, like the travel patterns of the people who are using Tiger Transit right now in the middle of the day, not in the peak periods when the roads are most are clogged. And I would just say that that kind of thing has absolutely everything to do with the use that's proposed, and we have to hear about that before we can even talk about any of these other engineering design concerns. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, may we respond and provide an answer to that?
If you would care to, yeah.
Sure. Mr. Leung, you remain under oath. You did address the use at the first hearing, and maybe just for the benefit of the gentleman and the public and the board again, describe the precise nature of the use that is proposed.
Great. Thank you. So I'm going to keep it relatively short and brief, but the proposed use here is a very high quality, high care oriented assisted living facility. What will be provided here is both a residence where local Princetonites, on average age will probably be around mid-80s, will have the opportunity, but certainly both younger and older, will have the opportunity to live for many of them some of their final days and receive high quality care and services that they would have otherwise been able to receive at home. So this is not a medical facility at all. It is not specifically independent living, rather it's assisted living. And some of the things that I've heard just now regarding usage of the shopping center and such, I'd just like to address really briefly, which is that I actually personally think this is quite appropriate for the location, as well as I actually do think there will be substantial improvement to the usage and the patronage of the shopping center. So in addition to our residents who will be living there, one of the most critical aspects of having a Sunrise in town is to improve the accessibility for the family members, ultimately the caregivers, people like you and me, who will be there to visit mom and dad or grandma and grandpa. And the fact that the Sunrise acts as a central hub for all sorts of activities with various religious and civic organizations as well as schools throughout the area. And so ultimately, whereas I think the vision of elderly people walking to McCaffrey's is really wonderful, on the other hand, we are creating an opportunity for both scheduled activity trips for our residents as part of the actual activity programming calendar, but also the most natural thing to do is when family members come to visit our seniors, they are going to take them out and probably go get a cup of coffee at McCaffrey's or go.
Actually, what you look for. Right?
That is exactly what we look for.
Precisely
Is the proximity to public transportation for our workers as well as to retail for the benefit of both our residents and their families. And finally, one of the things I think that was raised with regarding to traffic is that, just as a reminder, our traffic expert has testified just now that the overall trip generation impacts are relatively comparable in terms of scale and totality between this proposed project versus if the land was used for the zone senior housing to its max, which is 11 units per acre. So at the 4.5 acres, right? So they're actually relatively comparable in terms of that overall impact.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sir.
My name is Dean Rollman. I live at Rollman, Rollmann. I live at 36 Doran Avenue.
Sir, do you
yes,
serve
I
for
will.
Thank you.
I will. My wife and I moved to, I'll be very brief because the two preceding people were much more articulate than I can be. My wife and I moved to Princeton 50 years ago, 1968. We retired in Princeton. We strongly support the Princeton Shopping Center and our community. As seniors, we note something that I have not heard discussed until the previous two speakers. There is a profound difference between senior living and assisted living. We also note that the Princeton Planning Board explicitly named seniors as the future use beneficiaries of the property between McCaffrey's and Terhune Road. Removing those planned seniors would harm the shopping center business owners and those of us who rely daily on those people. And we wish them success, of course. Last point, one explicit requirement for a D variance is that the variance, and this I quote, not impair the intent of the zoning planners. The proposed variance would clearly alter and impair that intent. The zoning board is therefore prevented by law from granting a D variance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jean Rosenblum, Rosenblum. I will tell the truth.
Thank you.
I live on Grover Avenue. I spoke at the first meeting. I'm not going to repeat anything I said then. I would say I am encouraged by the changes that have been described today, although I have to say it's very hard to envision them, and I wish that we had been provided with them in advance so we could have a better idea of exactly how it's going to work. And part of that is I would like to know, I know you said a couple of times there are some variances left. I want to know precisely what they are, and I would hope that you would address that. But before I get that answer, I do want to say that while I am encouraged about the changes that are being described, to the degree that they appear to be less intensive in terms of the height and the setbacks. I am concerned that it seems to be completely in a state of flux. So if the zoning board approves a use variance with whatever other variances are left, I am not clear about what's going to happen after that. And I don't think the zoning board will be clear. So I don't want to use any phrases to describe that, but it's an uncomfortable feeling, I have to say. So, you know, on the one hand, yes, things look better. On the other hand, I don't know where they're going from here. And because you have this bifurcated application, the zoning board isn't going to know either. So I think that's a concern. But I would like to know precisely what variances are left that you are still requesting and how much of a variance in each case you are requesting.
So I will ask our engineer to come back up to address the specific question regarding the variances. But before we do that, just in terms of helping you feel more settled about the fact that we don't intend for this to be in a state of flux, I'm just going to share with you that our intention is that the plan that is shown today, that's on Board A10, will be fully submitted prior to the next meeting and thus reviewed by staff and by the board.
And the public.
And the public. And that plan will have all of the relevant details similar to the original plan that was submitted, and will then have all of the various variances requested be included in there. And so thus the particular zone change we would be seeking would be for that specific plan shown on A10, rather than just a potential mishmash of possible changes.
Mr. Policastro, just to clarify what Mr. Liang said, but you're still seeking this as a bifurcated
We are.
application?
We are.
So even when you come in at the next hearing, is that going to be considered your site plan, or that's simply going to be a more fleshed out informational plan?
The latter.
The latter.
We're still bifurcating.
Before you call the engineer, can I just interject? I mean, you're still asking for the same use variances that you were asking, the same D variances that you were asking for before, more or less, correct?
Yes.
Other than the height variance?
Accepting the height.
Right. So we don't need to hear about the bulk variances. We know that the bulk variances are not really germane to this particular application. We've heard 2 evenings of testimony, for the most part, about general architectural standards for assisted living facilities. And, you know, I mean, I'm very interested in the engineering. I think it's a very well-engineered and well-thought-through presentation. But I don't think we really need to waste time on the bulk variances right now. I think we need to focus on next meeting and the use variances and let the public continue with their comments.
Whatever the board's pleasure. A lot of boards do want to hear that in combination with the use variance because they are somewhat related, but we hear you, and our planner will address those. They're subsumed within the D variance in our view, but message received.
So, have you finished your statements? to the
I was
board,
hoping
or
to
have
get
you got-
an answer about the precisely what variances are left and how much are being requested.
Sure.
Do it again.
So in terms of the D variance, there's the use variance, which is still left. There's the floor area ratio variance, which is at approximately 38.2% versus 25%. There's the density variance, which is left, which is, although now it's for the 84 units. Instead of
I'm sorry, which is what?
The 84 units instead of the 89. And then in terms of the bulk variances, understanding though that that would really be addressed at site plan, but as they sit on this current plan, We're looking at an impervious coverage variance, relatively minor, though the standard is 40%. Right now, that plan's at approximately 41%. I'm going to envision that as we go to final site plan, that'll creep up a little bit, maybe 42, 43%, but still very close to the standard. And then finally, we have got parking between the roadway, Terhune specifically, and the building facade.
And the parking variance is for the number or the location?
It's for the location. We're actually fully compliant with the number of parking stalls because that is regulated by the residential site improvement standards, and we've actually exceeded that standard.
You're saying it's not regulated by Princeton's ordinance?
That's correct. It's superseded by law.
Did you mention floor area ratio also?
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, miss.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Marina Rabina, 28 Gorey Street. I am a local resident, and a local architect, and also the member of the Site Plan Review Advisory Board, the architect board that you mentioned that you would like to appear in front. I have 3 comments I would like to make, and even though this is not a testimony, I will speak truthfully. Is that okay? Or is this a
Ms. Rubina, you're not appearing, though, as a member
Yes,
of
I was
SRAB.
just going to say, I'm not appearing as a member of the SRAB, but I do have a question about the procedure, though. Is that okay?
If it's just a question about the procedure, because if this applicant is coming in front of you, you know, it might require you then to step aside from.
Well, here's my question. This was my second question, but the question is that, to me, what is happening here is a going around the process, that all of these presentations that should have been happening in front of SRAB, and we should have been having these discussions in front of SRAB, and not spending 3 zoning board meetings having this discussion. And it just seems very strange that you are asked to make a decision or opinion or ruling without having support of your environmental commission, SRAB, or any of those boards having reviewed the plans, worked it out, have meetings. It just seems like a total way of going around the process and wasting the public's time and blocking up the system, holding up 3 zoning hearings. So that, I don't know. Hopefully that didn't disqualify me from looking at this application at SRAB. That was one point. The second point I'd like to make is what I think the bifurcation process is. Maybe I'm wrong, but the bifurcation is, are we going to change the use for this property or are we not going to change the use? And then the site plan is the second phase. So to me, the changing of the use is a total opportunity loss, because this is a wonderful opportunity to have senior housing here where people would actually have a sort of integrated with shopping, with walking places. And it just seems like when we're faced with building affordable housing, creating community, this is such the wrong direction to take, that it's just seems to me that all of this is just eye-washing to direct attention away from the real issue. Maybe I'm being too blunt. And my third point is that I did not grow up in this town. I moved here from California 10 years ago. And the really good experience that I had at seeing a project in Berkeley, California in front of a zoning board was that an applicant for a store that only sold produce came and said, we would like to open in this former abandoned supermarket building, move our produce store there. And the zoning board said, no, by our law, we're supposed to have a full-blown shopping center. And they said, or a supermarket. And the store said, okay, fine. Well, we will become the full-blown shopping center, or not shopping center, supermarket. And that store is a famous world-known Berkeley Bowl that has sprouted and became famous all because of zoning rules. So what I'm trying to tell you is you guys are very flexible. You're designing, you're adjusting, you're listening. So what maybe you should be listening to is what we really want is we really want senior housing. So why don't you help us with that? Why don't you go ahead? You're so flexible. You're trying so hard. Why not just do that?
That's
So-
what you wish that they would do, but they are not appearing before the board to make that type of appeal. They've come with a plan, and we have to hear what they want. We're not
Right.
designing for them.
Right.
If they meet the specifications that zoning
Right, except they-
requires, then that's what
Right, but
we're
the
listening.
point I'm trying to make is they're asking to change the zoning, but maybe if they were to comply with zoning, it would be so much better. That's all my points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hi, Adam Bierman, 193 Grover Avenue.
And Mr. Bierman, you swear affirm your testimony will be truthful.
Across my heart, hope to
Thank
die, yes. Lifelong resident, I'm back in the house I grew up in. Again, I do appreciate how flexible you are and how you're trying to reach consensus. I just want to say for the record, many people already said, made these comments. It would be nice for senior housing, and if it was senior housing, of course, hopefully the scope and sequence of the project would be comparable for the neighborhood in terms of how many apartments you had, zoning for cars. But the second reason I guess a lot of people want senior housing, has been said before, the shopping center has become, at least my downtown, Nassau Street has become more, I think, touristy. You can't find parking, and I think that's the sentiment a lot of us have. Even though I do appreciate, again, that especially the water runoff. Over the years, when we get these storms that come once every 2 years, the water seems to go down into Grover Park, down the sidewalk into Grover Avenue. And that's still a concern no matter whatever is built there, and I appreciate, though, I'm not an expert on water retention, but I do appreciate that. But now everything is in flux. Are we going to get, I don't know if you can answer this, what kind of information are we going to get about new meetings, especially in the summertime when people tend to go away? I mean, what is the timetable? Any idea right now? Can anyone even project something?
No, not at this point. It's very complicated. We did a lot of maneuvering to get this meeting scheduled, so we'll have to have a discussion.
And again, I do appreciate all that, but it's true. I thought we were going to settle this and about the usury and everything, and we have busy lives too, and this is important to us. We want to find out.
All the board can do is to give adequate notice of when the next meeting on this will be heard. And if you're not here, that's unfortunate.
No, I understand that. I mean, you can't, you don't think about Adam when you're planning the meeting, but at the same time, hopefully, we'll get some kind of notice. Thank you.
David Tenike, 252 Terhune Road, Princeton.
And you swear affirm your testimony will be truthful. Thank you, sir.
Yes, I swear. I'm right on the corner of Terhune and North Harrison, and sometimes sitting watching TV right on the corner, I'll see.
Could you speak more into the microphone? I
Yeah.
have a job hearing you, as must the recorder.
Sometime in the evening when I'm watching TV, I'll see 5 to 6 different ambulances come by into the area with the sirens, everything blaring. There's a lot of congestion already. I'm totally against everything that they're bringing to the board here, and I really hope it doesn't get approved. And because we as residents, we're going to have to live with this once everything is done on the other end, and they move on to other projects and cash their checks. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Carolyn Barnshaw, 422 Terhune Road.
And Ms. Barnshaw, any testimony you give will be truthful?
I swear.
Thank you.
I just have a question about the height of the building. I didn't hear the exact height.
So
The highest.
Yeah, so the height of the building will be underneath the 35-foot height requirement. The exactitude is still being worked on, but it will be under 35 feet.
Because, as you know, back in 1996, Sunrise had a proposal for a very large structure, and the residents asked that the height be no higher than 30 feet because of the 10 or 15-foot rise of the property. And they're afraid it's just going to be looming up there because if it's more than 30 feet because of the height. So it's concerned, it was rejected because it's massive building project on a very tiny piece of land. And that's still, I think, a big concern. Also, the traffic in the area. Thanet Road, which is sort of across from Grover, has 3 very large office buildings that used to be occupied by Church and Dwight. And those buildings are essentially empty now. But if they get filled up again, there are going to be very, very major traffic problems because people come out and are trying to get to the light, and when they can't get to the light, then they go down Grover very fast, or they go down Terhune, Van Dyke. So
everyone drives at the speed limit in Pennington because the roads are patrolled and they know they get a ticket if they exceed the speed limit. That's not a zoning issue, that's a police issue.
Oh, I'm making a point about there are going to be problems, I think, but anyway, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Ning Yan, Ningyang, 406 Terhune Road. I speak truth, yes. I heard a traffic study about the peak hour traffic. I'm just a little concerned about just overall quality of life because of traffic. Because currently we can still enjoy a few hours of quiet time. I was reading about the traffic study, different assisted living sites. The traffic is more spread out throughout the day, even during the very off-peak hours at night and as well as the weekends. So I'm very concerned that just the little bit of quiet time we have on Terhune Road might be impacted by this traffic, because they do go different traffic patterns compared to regular rush hours. The other thing is, I didn't hear, they asked such a bulk variance. I didn't hear what was the harm to, comply with the existing rules. Sounds to me, if possible, reducing a few units probably, will meet all those variance rules. I didn't know why that cannot be done, just in case, I didn't quite get that information. So that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Nuria Diaz-Tena. I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you.
I live in 22 Clearview Avenue, just at the backyard of the shopping center. I've been living there for nearly 20 years, and I assure you it has been a pleasure to live there because it's a prime location. You can walk to the shopping center where everything is there. So even when I had no car, because it was total, I could just go to the shopping center. You can get public transportation. I work in New York, so I had no problem going to New York, coming back and forth. So I think it's a prime location, and you have already told yourself that you want to do the best for the community. So our community needs people living in that prime area next to the shopping center that can go to the shopping center and use the facility, enjoy Princeton, and live a happy life. So if you just think that, okay, my visitors are going to come and use the shopping center, well, if you have a senior citizen center instead of an assisted living, you have the visitors too. But besides, you have the senior citizens that can use the shopping center also. So I think that we can use the area that we're talking about for a better purpose than an assisted living. Thank you.
Julia Hosford, 430 Terhune Road.
And Ms. Hosford, any testimony you give this evening will be truthful, correct?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
There are 2 issues that I would like to have Sunrise do again.
Could you speak into the microphone? I can't hear, and the recorder won't get what you're saying.
You spoke about the sidewalk that you're going to build. Okay, this is what I would like you to do. Measure the footage or yardage from Terhune to Grover Avenue, from Grover Avenue to Harrison Street. Measure that area and consider that you're going to have how many driveways coming out. You're going to have 2 from yours, 3 from the house next door, and then another one on the corner, and then Terhune Road. So that's many driveways coming out. So I don't know how much sidewalk is going to be there for the use of the residents in that short space of time, space. Okay? I would like you to measure that. And then see how much actual sidewalk is there from all the driveways that are coming out. That's one thing. And the other thing is then, it's such a short distance, people will have to cross at that point to go down to where we have sidewalks on Terhune Road. The only other option is to go up Grover, where there is no sidewalk. So I don't think it's going to be a very much benefit, which you say would be a benefit. The second thing is I'm not happy with the way you measured the traffic. I think the way to measure the traffic, there were a lot of words used, peak time, downtime. I think the way to measure traffic is to measure the number of cars going up the entire day times 5 or 6 days a week. That's the way I want the traffic measured. And I also want the traffic measured how many cars go in and out of the medical group. Not at, you say it, at peak times. I want the number of cars because it's in the thousands. I know that for a fact. We took our own survey. We had the police department make a survey a few years ago. It's at least 13,000 cars a week. Never mind the way you put it, peak time and downtime. That's not of any value to me. I want the number of cars now going up Terhune Road, and the number of cars going in and out of the medical group should be in the hundreds every day. That's how I want it measured, okay? The other thing I have to say is that when I came here in 1955, the shopping center was already built and functioning in 1954. The original plan had no buildings around the periphery. It was just the central shopping center. Nothing was supposed to be built. So that variances have been given, and PNC I think the gas station may have been the only one possible, but I'm not positive about that.
We're talking about the shopping center?
Yes, there was a gas station there.
What is the relevance to this?
Well, only that it's relevant that this particular lot that you're talking about was always green. Nothing was ever going to be built on it. Nothing. That's the way it was from the very beginning, and I'm not sure that it has to be built on in any event. Is there anything terrible?
So you're saying the lot should stay green rather
I would
than
like,
be built
yes.
on?
We talked a lot this year about sustainable Princeton. I don't know if saying sustainable Princeton means that to you, but I can't see why that lot can't be, buy it, let the town buy it from the comforts they knew that it was not supposed to be built on when they bought that lot. They were aware of that. Buy the lot and keep it green and just clean it up, take out the junk and let it stay the way it is. And let's have
That's
some...
not what's being proposed. I understand that you might like that idea, but I think we understand your point, and thank you very much.
Okay.
My name is Jill John. Last name is spelled Jahn. I live at 29 Clearview Avenue. And I have 2 points. The first is that this location...
Ms. John, any testimony you give will
Oh,
be truthful,
yes.
correct? Thank you.
I affirm, yes. Thank you. My first point is that this location is such a superb site for senior housing that I think it would be a terrible shame to not use it for that. As much as loved ones of residents at an assisted living facility might take their parents and grandparents to get coffee once a week at McCaffrey's, that isn't the same as seniors doing their weekly shopping there and, you know, going out for other things. That I think the location is just so superb for a place for seniors to live. My other point is that I hope it's an appropriate request, given the charge of the zoning board, that they consider the zoning variance needed for this in light of the affordable housing plans that are being developed some of which will be right by this site. I looked at those I wasn't able to attend that meeting. I didn't find out about it until after it occurred. But I looked carefully at the slides showing this area. And in addition to this site for the affordable housing that's proposed, the assisted living site, there are two other housing projects that are possibly pending under the affordable housing plan. One is just to the east, will be to the left of this site, where they're planning 25 units in back of 4 houses, the first 4 houses on Grover. And also proposed are 150 units to be added somewhere on the Princeton Shopping Center property. So in addition to this assisted living site, there's proposed 175 more housing units right in that area.
But that is not before this board
I know,
at this time.
and so
This
that's
is
why
a
I said I
particular
didn't
site
know
that we're discussing.
if you could consider the totality of this
Well,
under
we
your
can't,
charge
because it
or
isn't.
just that. Because obviously the proposed affordable housing and other units there will also significantly add to the traffic, the noise, the environmental impact that this will be a part of. So
Thank
that's why I was asking if it could be considered in total.
My name is Crystal Schivel, Schivell. I live at 24 Monroe Lane. I promise to tell the truth. I really appreciate the changes you have made, but I did notice that Exhibit A12 doesn't have the hill in it. It's that, oh, I think it's that, well, maybe, it's the one with the photo. It's, yes, but notice how it's on Terhune, not above Terhune. The hill is not there, is it? The hill, the ridge that you're building on. I just thought I'd point it out because it looks really nice, but it's not what it's going to look like in reality.
Yeah, so the way the site runs, it actually rises as you go further east along Terhune, right? But because we need to maintain a constant grade, so it's flat, we're taking the building from the low point over closer towards the intersection area, and we're running that flat all the way. So what's actually happening is that even as Terhune rises, we're actually digging into the hill. And so on the site plan, I'll point it out in a moment, there are retaining walls that are being put up to hold up the hill after we've dug out from under it.
So it actually, you're removing some of the hill. Yeah. That's favorable.
Yeah, so you can see here's a set of retaining walls.
Yeah.
Here where we've dug into. We kept the grade.
Interesting. Thank you. Well, I'm glad you clarified that. But I thought we're here for a use hearing. Last time I asked for evidence that there is a need for assisted living facilities. One of the questions I would like to find out at the next meeting is whether Acorn Glen is full, whether it has a waiting list. I think we need to know that in order to decide if this use is appropriate. Another question I have is, would Princetonians prefer a continuing care facility? I, for one, do not want to move, so I want to age in place and die there. And I'm not sure assisted living could do that for me if I fell very ill. I might have to go somewhere else, a nursing home, and that's another move, which does not make assisted living as attractive as continuing care.
So I think you raised a very good set of questions. I addressed a little bit of the need question in my original testimony when I pointed out the scale of the number of seniors, the number of caregivers.
I know, and I said it sounded very good for making money, but not necessarily for a need, for addressing an actual proven need in Princeton.
Maybe let him respond.
I wish I don't want to get into all these.
I know.
totally circular
I have
discussions.
asked my questions, and
You've
I
made
will
your
sit down.
point.
Okay.
It's in the record. It will be considered.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Additional need will be discussed by our planner at our planner's testimony at the next opportunity. I appreciate the particular point you made about a continuing care opportunity and a chance to potentially be able to stay at a community or a facility for kind of the remainder of your life. And we think that's a very fair desire. In general, most continuing care retirement centers tend to be much, much, much larger. We're talking about campuses that are in the 300 to 500 plus unit scales. Yeah. However, the real benefit here at a Sunrise is that we are at the very forefront of being able to care for residents until with very high degrees of need. So just as a general statistic to give you a sense of what we're able to do, while we are not a skilled nursing facility, on average, about 50 to 60% of all move-outs from Sunrises are related to death. And so that, in some ways, I think people may misunderstand that, but I actually think that's a great statistic to show that our residents are able to stay with us until really their final day.
Thank you.
My name is Louise Witonsky, W-I-T-O-N-S-K-Y. I live at 450 Terhune Road, and I swear I'm telling the truth or asking the right questions that I can. Listening to the engineer talk and saying that the traffic amounts were sort of normal for a small town or a big city? Is there any difference? I mean, we feel who live on Terhune that we are overwhelmed with traffic. We also have that problem with speed that he said he couldn't do anything about. But we also, because of the excellent school system, we're getting more children. Princeton, you might think of as being an older community, but we're getting so many more children, and there's so many more children walking to school and bicycling. There's so many people bicycling. They have to be considered with this added traffic. And with the environment, when I think of all the water that you're going to need, I'm concerned because I know of the floods that can come in Princeton. I was here during one time. But even if there isn't a flood, with all of your blacktopping and the size of this building on such a small property, I worry about mosquitoes. New Jersey is overrun with mosquitoes, and with climate change, we're getting worse types of mosquitoes coming north. I think it takes a teaspoon to breed more mosquitoes. And you're going to be having all this runoff. You're talking about swales and having the water run off. It's not going to drain because of that shale and the clay. And these are just some of the concerns. I haven't listened to all of your ideas because the last time I heard you came and you changed. I cannot believe that for 5 people, a difference of 5 people, you could get rid of one whole level of building? I mean, that seems amazing. Are you going to be making smaller units? I don't quite understand what's going on, but that is for the board to ask. I was just concerned about the environment, putting such density in such a small area for a small town like Princeton. It upsets me. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Joel Schwartz. I live at 1 Armour Road.
Mr. Schwartz, any testimony you give will be truthful this evening?
I so swear.
Thank you.
It seems to me that this is a good use and a use that's needed in Princeton, but the question that many people have been raising is whether this use is the best or the most appropriate use for the site, and therefore deserving of the use variance. So I have a procedural question or two for the board. I had understood that the application was bifurcated and that the variances were going to be considered. I assumed that by bifurcated, I had assumed that meant they were going to be decided first rather than presenting the entire case. Did I misunderstand the meaning of bifurcation in this context?
Well, there needs to be some sort of agreement that the site can be used as is being proposed, and then a site plan and final building plans and so on will be generated, and the board will...
Mr. Schwartz, maybe I can address that
Thank you.
question. The state land use law allows an applicant to bifurcate, and in so doing, normally they have to give the board at least enough information to consider the variances, particularly a use variance. They've eliminated some of the other, what we call D variances, but they still need some of them. So for the board to address any of that, they do need an informational context. So I believe that's what the applicant is, with this testimony. It's true there hasn't been planning testimony yet, but that's what they're trying to achieve, but that they are still going to come back ultimately with the final site plan. And were the board to grant these variances, they could condition many things that would have to appear in that final site plan. So I don't know if that answers the question.
It did. I'm going to sort of say back to you what I think I heard so we can clarify we're all on the same book and page. So it sounds like it's reasonable for the applicant and for the board to get an overview of the entire application or understand what it's about before deciding on the variances. So does that mean just procedurally that after the applicant presents everything you'd like to know in order to understand the application, if you, for example, take up the question of the use variance first, for argument's sake, and decide that it's not deserving of the use variance, does that mean game over, and therefore it doesn't matter about the parking?
Yes.
Okay. I really appreciate you clarifying that. It was a little bit confusing to me. I have a second related procedural question. It seems like an issue that a lot of residents made is that the issue that this site is relatively unique in its proximity to the shopping center, and therefore in evaluating whether it should get a variance, I'm sort of asking whether this is the best use of this site in the sense that there aren't too many places that are walkable to the shopping center. So my question is, in trying to evaluate the merits of the use variance, do you, as part of your inquiry and the questions you ask yourselves, something related to metrics in the sense that what's the likelihood or how do you measure the degree of use that the shopping center could get relative to another use? And I try to frame my question in the following sense. Since the shopping center, for most of the commenters and most people in town, is not just a collection of stores, but effectively a second form of downtown, does your inquiry actually try to establish metrics? Is this the best use of a site whose nature is that it's in very short supply? I hope that wasn't too confusing. What my question is, do you apply metrics in order to try to evaluate that?
The zoning gives a certain flexibility in what this property can be used for, and a conditional use is what is being requested effectively, and that's in the zoning plans.
Actually, Chairman Royce, it's not a conditional use for this zone. It's true that assisted living is permitted as a conditional use in other zones in town, but not in this zone.
This is a straight use variance.
Yeah, this is strictly a use variance.
Yeah.
A conditional use would say it's a permitted use if you meet certain requirements, but that's not the case in this zone. In this zone, it's not allowed, so the applicant will need to make the case that you should allow the use that they're seeking.
Can I ask, how long has it been zoned in this manner? How many years has that been, that it's been vacant and zoned in this way?
I'm not sure.
It's got a name.
The planner
It's been
retired,
vacant for
and
decades.
it's before my time. I noticed there's been revisions in the book in 1996 to this zone, in 2003, but I can't say for certain. It's been for probably the last 10 years, but I could try to get some more information.
It's not a conditional use. Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought it was a conditional use. I'd forgotten that one. Yeah. It would be much easier if we got the zoning for the two things the same. Okay, have you
Just
another point to
just
make?
about done. The clarification you just gave was very, very helpful, so just want to refocus my question in the following sense. Since the bar for a use variance in the MLUL language is a fairly high bar, talks a lot about not having negatives and having lots of positives, to be brief. So is part of the purview in evaluating that to basically say that since the purpose of zoning is to make Princeton the very best Princeton we can, is part of what you're evaluating, is this, in the context of the importance of the shopping center, saying, is this the best way to support the character of Princeton?
I think the only way I can answer that is since the board hasn't heard any planning testimony yet from the applicant, they can't evaluate that. Ultimately, their job is to balance and weigh. If they feel that the use has positive things associated with it, they need to weigh against it what could be the negative impacts. And it's that ultimate weighing that they will do when they finally make the decision now about will it get the use variance or not.
Great, thanks for clarifying. I have one last very tiny question. There was some testimony about traffic and parking, and I think what I heard was that that no residents will have cars, so therefore resident cars don't figure into the parking count, and that the parking is primarily for visitors and for staff. So, and I think I heard that the parking provided is adequate for that purpose. Is it correct? So my question is, at the change of shift, presumably there's something like approaching twice the number of staff, or some multiple of the staff on premises at the same time. So is your testimony going to address what happens at change of shift time when there's more people?
So I addressed a little bit of this in my original testimony last time. I'll touch upon it a little bit further, and if need be, our traffic expert can touch upon it as well. So we have roughly two different types of staff in a sense, right? So on one hand, we have our management level staff who work more traditional hours, and then we also have our frontline staff who provide the care and who are then on shifts. Right, and so that number then is split. So it's not the entirety of our staff that's actually turning over at any particular shift change, right? And between shifts, the peak would be the daytime shift, so the 7 to 3. And just to address one of the points made earlier, I think by someone about kind of disruption to people's quiet enjoyment, I just want to make that point of, our peak shift is in that 7 to 3 range. Our second shift then would be in the 3 to 11 range. Our residents, as you can imagine, go to bed relatively early. And so they probably won't affect quiet enjoyment, and we don't have peak shifts in the evenings. And then certainly in the overnights are smallest shifts, which will be, barely maybe 10 people range, right? And so, as a whole, then, your actual net increase in terms of shift change is not nearly as significant as you would imagine, because let's say on peak shift there might be a total of about 35-ish employees. Not all of them are frontline, right? So about half of those would be the frontline people who would then be.
I understand. Thank you for clarifying. Let me just rephrase my question. So given what you just said, and it's very helpful, have you yet presented or will you present an actual numerical rather than a subjective analysis, as you just did, in terms of at the peak changeover in shifts, you have a certain actual number of people who are shifts are ending and another certain number who are coming, add those two numbers together, and presumably that's the number of people who are presently entering and leaving the site. Has that testimony been presented yet, or will that be?
No, it has not, and we're not going to present to that degree of detail. I think your question ultimately lies to the amount of parking is necessary and if that's sufficient. And in terms of addressing that, I would like to point out that part of the reason why we chose this site is the proximity and availability of public transportation. And so many of our frontline workers who work at Sunrise often take advantage of public transportation or use car sharing. And so even providing such a degree of precision on shift change doesn't really capture the true impact to the usage of parking.
I understand what you just said, but it just seems to me that there must be some period of time when if you're right at the exact number, it seems logical to assume that there's a period of time when there's more vehicles trying to get in and out. And I'm not trying to debate that. I just want to understand if that's something that's going to be presented numerically.
Let's have Mr. Shropshire address that specifically.
Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, I can confirm that the studies that have been done where you're counting the actual number of cars that go in and out of a driveway at a Sunrise or another assisted living, and counting the number of parked vehicles within the site during those times when you have the peak overlap. I can't say with any precision how many employees were doing that, but I can tell you that the surveys were done at that exact time and actually bordering those times so that we know we captured the peak of the peak, not only for the parking, but for the ins and the outbounds. And to get to that level of detail, just to confirm what Mr. Liang had said, because of the use of mass transit, because of the use of carpooling, and some people pick up and drop off, it's very, very difficult to say exactly how the employees would interact with all that. But I can tell you that the peak parking time does occur at that 2:45 time frame when you have that, as Jerry said, the changeover in the shifts.
And how many sites have you done that for approximately in your?
How many have we surveyed, or how many have I evaluated?
In your career.
In my career, I've evaluated about 60 of them, and we've surveyed probably 5.
Great. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, I think that's the end of the public discussion. You wish presumably to make comments to the board.
I guess we're looking for, at this point, a special hearing. Unless the board has comments on the plan that was presented tonight, we have one more witness. Obviously, there's some follow-up housekeeping items that we will address at the next hearing, along with Mr. Phillips, our planner.
Well, what I'm advised by Mr. Bridger is that the next meeting is booked, July 2.
Extension for a possible hearing in September, because I don't think it's fair to the public to do this in July or August.
Are we required to go forward to let it?
The case times out tonight. Your option is to deny the case tonight, or they give us an extension.
Well, no. Of course we're giving you an extension.
I don't want applause from the audience. You're there to be quiet and listen and talk when you're invited. Thank you very much.
Of course the extension would be granted, and we'll give you a writing to that effect. Is there not an opportunity for a special meeting in June?
No, I'm sorry. It's, with all the other cases going on, we don't have a planner. I had board members stay on the board so they could hear this case, so unfortunately it's not. And we would like to see the plan to have some kind of intelligent comments on it before we appear before the board.
We would
again.
not have finished this evening even if we had presented Mr. Phillips.
Okay.
It's not even a question. And I've spoken to the board's counsel about that. It's not short testimony. It's very important, as many of the questions are surrounding the planning issues. So we would not have finished tonight in any event.
So is that why you didn't have the person who was going to speak to that part of it come?
He is always the last witness, and I think counsel will attest to that, because the planner is the cleanup witness in any event.
Can I ask a
question? We would not have finished.
We're still here.
No, go ahead.
Well, I think maybe what Mr. Palacastro is referring to is I think the assumption was the board would have a lot of questions. We're 10:15 now, so I think their expectation was it could not finish tonight, this application. So they chose not to bring their planner tonight, but given, I think given the questions that the board has raised and probably will have more questions when they hear planning testimony. I assume that's why the decision was made not to do the
Yeah,
planning
we were
testimony
told there was a
tonight.
cutoff of 10:30 perhaps, and then 11 o'clock, a final cutoff. That was our judgment.
I don't have the minutes. We don't have the minutes from the last meeting. Why are we considering this again tonight? Why didn't we finish it last time?
The planner wasn't here, or there was
Well,
not
they
sufficient
didn't finish
time
the
to get the
presentation.
testimony after the public hearing was 11 o'clock, and they carried it to the next meeting, which is not uncommon for an application of this size.
Nor do we have our traffic expert
Okay, yeah.
testify. We had him here, but
Yes, sir.
there was no time for him to testify. We were ready.
So the issue is when is the next time we can hear it?
Correct.
And I'm sorry, June is just, there's too many other hearings going on with the planning board that we have to be at. We need to call in, it's vacation time, so unfortunately, we need to the September 30th.
So you say September is the earliest time?
Well, I just don't think, we might be able to have a special meeting in July or August, but I don't know if the board's
probably
available
not. Well,
or
that's
the
the-
public
that's
is
the-
available. I mean, I think it's
Experience
fair, they've been to
suggests.
2 hearings, I think we should have an opportunity for them to hear the final testimony.
Plus, the concern is, if we start losing board members who are not available due to vacation time, I assume you want a full board to hear this, correct?
We would.
All right, so July and August, with people's vacations, it would be difficult to promise you a full board during those months, when people are traveling and they have superseding plans here. So what is the date in September, though, for, it's not September 30th, is it?
The 26th, but I think we would have a special meeting so that this is the only item on the agenda so we can get
You
all
mean
your
in
testimony.
September?
Yes, that would be my,
So we would have in September a regular meeting and a special meeting?
Yes, sir.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That seems to me to be the best
Well,
thing.
then you'd have to
So-
renotice, because we don't have the date yet.
We would, of
so-
course, renotice
Right.
and provide the extension, so we would request a special hearing if it's possible.
Sure.
We understand the dilemma with vacation schedules, but we would nonetheless request it respectfully and if possible, and then we would renotice, of course.
All right, so the extension of time is to September 30?
Agreed.
Okay.
thank you.
What day was that?
It's
The 30th.
It's carried to the, they're giving us a period until September 30th. I don't know the date, but the meeting will probably be scheduled before our regular meeting.
It would be earlier
Yeah,
in the
we'll
month.
start calling around and making
The second week of
arrangements and get it.
September, something like that, is that what
Yeah,
would happen?
I just have to see when other planning board meetings are and,
Yeah.
you know, but, and board member availability
Yeah.
and the applicant's availability.
Okay. So then we carry this until then, is that correct?
Yes. and we
That's
will-
your
we-
understanding?
Understood.
Well, yeah, Claudia will be calling everybody, getting availability for dates in September,
Yeah, I
hopefully the
think
mid
once
part of
the date's
September.
decided, they have a responsibility of sending out
Yes, sir.
notices
Yeah, no, they,
of that meeting.
if I had a date, I would give it to you, but just the circumstances.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, they will renotice. Yes, sir.
Good, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So then we are,
Can I just go on record quickly and make a comment?
I'm sorry?
Can I just go on record with a comment before
You
we
can
adjourn?
say anything you like. We haven't adjourned yet.
I just wanted the opportunity to echo the comments of Mr. Bottingheimer from maybe 2 hours ago. That you know, I think that this case was bifurcated for a reason, and I think that the point of our early testimony was supposed to be about the use variance, and so I think in light of that, it's particularly outrageous that we're finishing the second meeting and we still have not heard from a planner. I think that I mean, you mentioned that the planner is often the last person to speak, and that's fine, but really, you know, in light of the last testimony we heard, I mean, the point is that we have to address the use variance question before any of these other things are relevant, and that's how you've brought it to us. That's the process you've created. So I think that it is disrespectful to the board, to the staff, and also to the public that the process was done this way.
We mean no disrespect whatsoever. Again, we were not going to finish tonight, so we acknowledge your comments, but No disrespect.
And I also think that that's the first I've heard that you didn't expect to finish tonight, and I think that it would have been nice to know that in advance.
Does anyone else
Thanks.
have a comment to make? Okay, so then we will adjourn your case until September. And I don't think we have any other business this evening, and so the meeting will itself adjourn at this point.
Thank you.
Good.
What if half of us have resigned by September? What happens then?
I'm sorry?
What if half of us resign by September?